Hi, and thank you for joining me. This is Danny Beit-Or, and I want to take the next 15 minutes or so to talk about how correctly to analyze rental properties and real estate or residential rental properties, and to show you how we do it using our Excel. We're first going to talk about the concept, the idea, the understanding of how to analyze, and before we dive into the Excel, and I will go ahead and explain the Excel as well. So we'll take a few minutes just to understand what's the logic, the idea, the concept behind the Excel. So when we go into the Excel, we can actually understand how it works. Let me just start by talking about what I typically see out there and I don't really like. This is when I go out to events and I see flyers or online and I see something that is very plain vanilla. It tells me pretty much nothing. Here's the purchase price. No, this one doesn't even have the purchase price. So maybe even worse, but the loan amount, the expense, some of the expenses, the estimated rent, cash flow, photo. If you see something even a little bit nicer than this one, let's just say sometimes they are, but it's not comprehensive enough. That just doesn't tell you the entire truth. You should definitely take the time to do a full and thorough analysis. Now, let me just point out what is missing in this flyer, and then I'm going to tell you how I look at analyzing rental properties altogether, and how do we go about return on investments, and we dive into the Excel. So what's the problem with this analysis that we just saw? So the first thing is this one just gives us a snapshot of what the current house, the current month, the first year. I'm not even sure. So let's say it's a 1 month representation of the property. When we buy rental properties, at least when I do and my investors do, we buy it with a plan or intention to hold it for multiple years. Multiple years being 5, 10, 15, 20, even more. When we analyze the rental property, we probably want to see how it behaves over the multiple years, at least 5, if not 10, if not more. So it'll give us a better indication. Obviously, that will, the numbers of that property will change over time. Rent will change. Equity that we build will change, and a few other things. We're going to go, we'll look at it in a second. Second thing that is missing here, or two more things that are missing in this flyer, are the leasing fee and the vacancy fee. Leasing fee is the fee we pay a property management, if we use one, to rent the property out. It's different than the monthly management fee that they typically charge. So sometimes let's say a 1 month rent that we would pay the property management could be less of 1 month rent. We would pay the property management company to lease the house, to acquire the tenant. And then we're going to pay the monthly management fee. So the leasing fee is missing here. The second thing is vacancy. Where do I see some representation of vacancy? Even a little one? Many times in real estate, I've learned it's not about the big numbers. Actually, it's a small numbers game. So leasing fee, which is 50, let's say $50 a month, if we spread it over multiple years. And vacancy could be another $20. So all of a sudden, this $336 are going to be actually more like 280, maybe 250. So you see, it's already, kind of missing something. So you probably want to look at the small numbers as well and try to evaluate them as much as possible or assess them as much as possible to give you as clear or as accurate as possible scenario or transparency to that property. So we're able to look at those figures, as good as possible. I'm not, some of the numbers are not going to be, we don't know them. So we have to make an assumption, but we want to try and make good assumptions. Things that we do know, we have to make sure they're there and represented in our analysis. One other thing I don't see here, or two more things. One is, how much is this property going to cost me? Well, I see the loan amount. I can calculate the down payment of 20%. So maybe, $20,000. But is that it? What about closing costs, mortgage costs? Some repairs that we may have to fix the property, maybe replace carpets and paint and buy a refrigerator or something like that. That adds up to $2,500 easily. Those are not represented. So how much truly out of pocket I'm going to be buying this property? The down payment is probably the biggest portion of it, but it's not all of it. And second is where's the analysis? What's the return on investment? What am I looking at? See, it's not giving me anything. So this is very, very poor. And this is a real one. I'm not, I didn't manipulate the flyer just to, for the sake of this explanation. I just want to show you things that I've seen in the past. Not a good one at all. Missing a lot of stuff. And let me tell you how I go about it and how we should probably consider it. So let's start by talking, first of all, on the ROI, the return on your investment. The ROI stands for return on investment. The different ways to go about the ROI. Let me tell you how I think it's the best way, or in my opinion, works best when we're factoring or calculating the total return on investment on your investment property. Number one, it would be the cash on cash. Cash on cash is how much cash flow you have at the end of the year compared to how much you actually spent. So let's say we bought a property, the down payment, I'm just going to use simple round numbers. We bought a property and the down payment is $20,000, but we paid an additional $5,000 in closing costs, repairs, mortgage fees, etc. So we're out of pocket is $25,000. And let's just make it simple. Let's say at the end of the year, after all expenses, we are netting $2,500. That means our cash on cash is 10%. So right there, that's a starting component. So component number one, cash on cash, we have to factor. Easy. Number two, return on equity. What is return on equity? When we buy, and I'm going to make the assumption, more like most of us, we buy with a mortgage. When we buy in a mortgage, we borrow the principal, right? We pay interest on it, but we borrow the principal. The principal is not ours, but year after year, we start paying the principal down. So that means after 3 years, let's say our mortgage started at $80,000, and now 3 years later, it's now $75,000. So that means we paid part of the principal, $5,000, part of the principal that we borrowed, which was not our money to begin with. But the $5,000 that we paid off, it's a gain in our pocket. So that means we have an additional $5,000 worth of equity in our pocket. Okay, we have to add that into the equation of the total return on investment. And lastly, and the last factor is appreciation. Now, I don't think appreciation is somewhat of a, I don't want to say dangerous game, but something you want to kind of, deal with cautiously. I like to factor in appreciation in the, in the value of inflation. In this country, we have inflation. Year after year after year, over the long term, we're in the long run, we have inflation, maybe 4. My property will keep up with the cost of living, with inflation over time, even when we go through some rough patches, throughout life and throughout, our financial life. Over time, it will keep up with inflation. So I would factor in 5% for inflation, and that's also part of the return on investment. I have to tell you that if we look back at the past 2, 3, even 4 years, this is January 2015, most of the markets, actually all the markets that I've been involved in, have done around 10% in appreciation, if not more. So my Excel, or the way I look at it, is more conservative than what the market is doing, but I don't want to factor high appreciation rate because I think it's speculative. I just want to keep it up, at the minimal. I do want to give it a presentation, and it has to be something reasonable. I call it inflation. So I'm going to factor that as well. So we have cash on cash, return on equity, and appreciation. 3 factors that are determining the total return on your investment. Let's move to the Excel, and I want to spend a few minutes, talking about the Excel, so we understand it. Now that we understand how we go about the analysis. Let me just say before we dive into the Excel, I have been analyzing properties. I've probably analyzed well over 1,000 properties in my career. I probably look at I want to say easily 50 properties per, on average per week, if not more. And over the years, I've refined and refined and refined and refined the process for myself. I needed a tool. I need a tool. Everybody that is investing need a tool to help make decisions. It's not a tool that it's not a guarantee tool. It's a decision, helping tool. We want to be able to evaluate one property over another and over the third. And how we're going to do that without something, some sort of a tool. It doesn't have to be this Excel, but you got to have that tool, in your belt that you can use in order to evaluate rental properties in a specific property. Every property will tell us a different story. And when I, in my first years as an investor, I probably use the approach of the worst case scenario. When you use worst case scenario, you're always going to kill the deal. And I have a cemetery full of, great deals that I could have done, which I killed because I used the worst case scenario. That didn't work for me. So I needed something, a little bit better. The best case scenario, obviously, nobody wants to use that. So I decided I need something in between. I call it the realistic case scenario. And I think the way I've designed this Excel is and the way, it's an Excel, we have to, input data into it. But the way it's designed is for us to use data and information as accurately as possible. We're going to have to make some assumptions, but they have to be realistic. It's based on experience, on what we've learned from our years, and what what you learn from the people you work with, in order to determine what kind of data to input into the Excel in order to generate the analysis. So let's look at the Excel. Let's understand how it works. Naturally, we would start at the start here tab. You can see that we've divided it into 7 sections, 1 through 7. Let's go one by one, or at least go over them very quickly. We don't need to explain every cell, but you just have to have the understanding. Well, we have the property specification where we put the address, the bedrooms, bathroom, etc. We don't need to explain that. It's pretty simple. We have the section 2, which is the purchase assumption, the purchase price, what we think the market value of the property is, maybe the same, maybe higher of the purchase price, how much improvement that we have. In this case, it's 500, but maybe we're going to have 2,500 because we have carpets, paint, and, and stove, whatever, in a micro. So it's going to be 2,500. We have closing costs, we have mortgage fee costs, and some additional fees. First of all, it tells me how much this property is really costing me. So the price is 136, but the total cost is 142,500. That's something, most analyses that I've seen do not even provide you. Then we go to the financing assumptions. By the way, if we, we're going to put the 20% down, the 4.75%, interest rate, 30 years, and it gives us the monthly mortgage payment, but it also tells us how much is this property going to cost us? What is my out-of-pocket expense to buy the property? The down payment plus the improvement, closing costs, mortgage costs, and some additional fees. So now I know this property is going to cost me $33,700, just to give us a bit of a benchmark. We're gonna go to put the assumptions about the financial assumption in section 4, the rent, property taxes, insurance, repairs, property management, the list divided over the period, or the monthly representation of the listing fee. We would typically pay, one lump sum when we have the first tenant, or when we are replacing a tenant. But in the Excel, we need to give it some sort of a representation on a monthly basis, because that's how our Excel works. Remember, this is not an accounting system. This is an analysis system. We have HOA, vacancy rate, and we have a summary of what our total expenses. Over here in section number 5, we're going to put the what we anticipate the overtime on average. Again, over time and on average, the rent increase will be. So that means rents do not increase in a straight line of 2% per year, but they do, little jumps like steps. And over time, if we look back, after 10 years, 15, 20 years, we will probably see that they've grown on average 2% per year. So we're going to factor that in. We're also going to factor that some of our expenses, the overhead expenses, such as property taxes, insurance, will also increase over time. Of course, this is an Excel. We can actually make a different assumption, to be a little bit more conservative. So there's no problem there. It's just an Excel. Then we're going to do the annual appreciation. Remember, I said, I'm using inflation. You may be a little bit more optimistic than me, that's fine. You can change it to 7.5%. If you're more pessimistic, just change it to whatever you think is best. And we're going to have some assumptions for the selling scenario. We're going to get around to it in a minute, but it just tells us what are we assuming those expenses or tax brackets will be when we sell the property. I'm going to get around to it in a second. And then we have what we call the general notes about this property. Before I move on, I just want to tell you that we have 3 versions of this Excel, the basic, plus, and premium. I'm using the premium right now to show you everything, but not everything is available. Not all the tabs are available in the in the basic and the plus. I'm going to go over it in a second. I just want you to be aware of that. So we started at the start here tab. We're going to go next. Before we go into the analysis tab, I'm going to go to the engine. The analysis engine, first of all, is only available in the premium version. You're not going to be able to see it in the other versions. The whole point of the analysis engine is a very, very comprehensive, analysis to take care of all the things that I told you. So remember, this is where we take and calculate the cash on cash, the return on equity, and the appreciation, and we factor them in per year. So when I look at the rental property, I want to see how it's going to perform over the next multiple years. This an engine is stretching those figures over 30 years. So so everything you see on the top part here, it's all the assumptions that we plugged in at the start here tab. So it's all the same. It's just, so we have it available. But it takes all those figures and it stretches them over. You can see year 1, year 2, year 3, year 10, etc., all the way for 30 years, and does all those calculations. So we're not going to spend time on it. I just want to tell you, this is what you're going to see this is what's working at the background. Let's move back to the analysis summary. In this page, we have the sections like before, that it's the same information that we put in the start here. We just have a mirror of it, so we can always have it in front of us. But I want to focus on area A and D primarily for this tab. Section A tells us the financial analysis and deal attractiveness. What it basically does is this: it takes the 5 years and see how the performance of the property in the sales, in the analysis engine. What's the performance over 5 years, 10 years, 15, and 20, and then it does averages for that period of time. So in 5 years, we know that the net cash flow is accumulated over those 5 years is $10,645, and we have created equity from appreciation and paying down the mortgage of, $43,700. So we have a total gain in these 5 years of $54,000 plus. The average cash flow per year is $21.29. The average cash flow per year per month, so that's during those 5 years, it's $177, in this example, and it's going to be $216, on average, per year for the first 10. See, it increases. And we have the average gain per year. We have the average ROI per year, and then we have the annual ROI. So we take the average of the ROI and we do it annually. So in the first 5 years, on average, this property, the total return on investment is 32.3%. Okay, and then is what we project based on the assumption the property value is going to be like. So this gives you a vision of how this property is going to perform in 5 years, 10 years, 15, and 20. Okay, so just give us that horizon, and not just the first month, the first year, the first 2 years, because those are typically not the best time. Property, probably the worst year of a property is probably the first one. So this is how we evaluate that. We get the analysis and see what we call the deal attractiveness. Section A, very, very important section in the Excel. This is what we actually, everything we're doing around it is to get those figures in, and it's exactly what we talked about: the cash on cash, the appreciation, and the equity build-up from paying down the mortgage principal. Then we have a little section here. It's more of a, kind of to help you evaluate each property. This section is actually has two main parts you can add to it, but there's multiple factors that we typically see and we're typically concerned about, and you can add if you want to, of course. Factors that we want to evaluate. I call it the baseline criteria. This is your baseline criteria. And the baseline criteria meaning what is the threshold that will dictate or will determine if this is a good property for me, at least for an initial evaluation. So if we go and on one hand, we set it up, we set those criteria once. You set your own criteria. You can say school is 5 and 1,100, square feet in minimum square footage, and it has to be at least 3.2, but it can be, 1985 and after. What is the rent purchase price ratio? What is the minimum cash flow looking to have, and what is the minimum, average return on investment? Okay, and then this is what you set. This is what this property is. So this property, let's just say this property schools are 8. And, let's just even do something in this. The square footage is 1450. The bedrooms and bathrooms are similar. It's actually 1986. The rent purchase price ratio is almost 1%. Cash flow is higher. So it almost passes on every baseline criteria that you have set. The only one that doesn't pass in this example is the square footage. And you can see that it's only 50. Let's just make it even a little bit more aggressive. 100 square feet less than the property, than your baseline. Now you have to make a decision if something you will kill the deal because it's not passing, or you say, you know what, that's the only thing that fails, and it's actually okay for me to still have this property, although it's not 100%, but you have to make a judgment. There is no such thing as a perfect property. There's only one that meets your criteria and does better than that. So you really have to, decide what makes sense to you. You can even say, we're looking for schools to be 7 and this is 6. You know what? 6 is okay considering everything else. I'm still going to move forward with it. This is only a tool to help you evaluate that property. Okay? It's not, there are no guarantees. It's not exact science because there's always risk and unknown factors, but at least it will help you determine or evaluate the property, and should you even consider moving forward and placing an offer. Now let me show you a few more tabs in this Excel before we wrap it up. We've added a tab that we call a brochure that you can actually print out the property for yourself, print out for someone else. So it's kind of set up in a way that it pulls out the important information and not all the information, so it's too cluttered. Only the important things, so you can use it for yourself. You can modify it, of course, as well to suit your own needs. We've added several months ago to the latest version the sales analysis. So how is this property gonna look like if we sell it, and we have sales expenses, and we have depreciation recapture, and we make some assumptions on your taxes, on recapture taxes, on sales expenses. Remember, it's all assumptions. How the property, how much profit you will have and what your returns will be. You can see that the first year you're going to lose money, and you're going to have 12%. You're going to start making money on the second year and after, so you can see it's actually improving year after year. The more we hold the property, naturally, it stretches the sales analysis per year over 30 years. So you can actually evaluate that if you want. We've added the amortization for your mortgage, so you can definitely use that. We have the analysis engine that we talked about, and general notes, just to give you something like a glossary on the Excel. One thing I want to tell you is, if you're buying cash, because it's in Excel and it's it's mathematical formulas, I just want to give you a little tip. When you're putting if you're buying cash and you're putting in a financial assumption, let's say you put down payment is not 20% but 100%, that's okay. It's still going to be may screw up the formula a little bit. So just be aware from using zeros. Instead of 4.75 in this example, I may just use 0.01%. So it never zeroes out, the formula just to be on the safe side, or I would do 99% just to be on the safe side, because sometimes the zeros really screw up the mathematical calculations. Other than that, those are just the things you need to be aware. Over here, we have the property taxes, by calculation, you can override it, either by, putting another tax rate, or if you know that you may just put, 2,400 divided by 12, and that's fine too. So whatever suits you. This is the Excel in a nutshell. Hopefully you will benefit from it. You don't have to use this Excel. Any tool that will help you make a decision, look at the numbers, it's great. The whole point is for you to have a tool to use so you can actually make better judgments, better decisions. Remember, we don't know if the returns are going to be on average $65 per month in this example. They could be higher, they can be lower. So you just have to use some common sense here. Things may change, so you just have to, but you have to start somewhere. You have to have some sort of a tool to help you get started with all those figures. It's up to you. You got to be responsible to make sure you feed the Excel with the correct information. If the insurance is, if the insurance you're buying in an area and the insurance is $1,400 a year, you just have to change that. You just have to change that. Okay, for example. So it's up to you to feed the correct information and as accurately as possible. You're always going to have some assumptions because we don't know how everything will behave. But a tool, some tool is definitely better than nothing. And I think this is an excellent tool. I've been using it for 4 or 5 years, keep polishing it and improving it. And it's been really, really, really beneficial for me and my investors to have something like this. A little bit comprehensive, but once you get your head around it and you understand it, it's rather easy, to use. With that said, I just want to, here's my contact information. I want to thank you for using it, for taking the time to listen to the Excel. And of course, I wish you tons of success with all your investments. Thank you very much. And I hope to hear or talk to you soon. Bye-bye.